So as we've established quite a few times on this channel already, One Piece has a really fun and diverse power system that makes the series a lot more enjoyable to read through. There are all of the insane powers that devil fruits give, hake that's the perfect counter and becoming a lot more diverse, and there are even other things that can help increase someone's power. And just like a lot of things in the One Piece world, these extra power enhancers are extremely bizarre, wacky, and fun to talk about. We've already talked about some of them on this channel already, as I've already made a video about the martial arts of the One Piece world, and that's what we're here to talk about today as well. Last time I talked about a few of the insane martial arts of the One Piece world, and the ones that we've already talked about were already pretty damn wacky, so I can't wait to talk about the new ones today. If you want to see the martial arts that I've already talked about, the link to that video will be in the description, as it's little things like this that make One Piece as enjoyable as it is. With that being said, while I'm gonna try to cover all the crazy martial arts that I didn't cover in the last video, I discovered a few while doing research for that last one, so there's a chance that happens with this video as well. This was honestly a really fun topic to cover in the last video that I made about it, so hopefully this time it's just as fun, and I think it will be because of the unexpected person that we'll be talking about first. No Sword style is a related fighting style that Zoro was forced to come up with during the Groggy Ring event in the Davy Back fight. In the manga, he literally only uses it during this part of the Davy Back fight, but he definitely used it a few more times in the anime, and that only makes sense because of the extra material that they're basically forced to make for it. With that being said, it is a canon technique, and it features in one of the only times that Sanji and Zoro have actually worked together in the story, so it makes it extra cool. This is an unorthodox form of Zoro's fighting style that uses no swords, in which he was able to use his body's physical power to emit shockwaves resembling his sword slashes. Since he has rarely been in a situation without any swords, Zoro has only shown one technique with this fighting style. That technique is Tatsumaki, and the motions of this technique are the same as 3 sword styles Tatsumaki, only this version is performed without swords, only with the arms. I feel like that's pretty obvious, but Zoro's lack of swords means the technique has no cutting power, and is more used to send the opponent flying. This is honestly a really memorable attack in my opinion, as he uses it on Pickles of the Foxy Pirates, in combination with Sanji to prove that the two would be an absolutely deadly duo if they didn't hate each other. And with that, even though I could move on, I want to use this time to talk about Zoro and Sanji's dynamic a little bit, because this is my video. Zoro and Sanji have one of the most interesting dynamics in all of One Piece, because while it's very clear that the two of them are rivals and bicker all the time, they can only be rivals because they have the utmost respect for each other. They each know just how powerful and important the other is, even though they would never admit it, and it makes the few times that they do cooperate some of the best moments in the entire series. One of my favorite examples of this comes during the Wano arc, as the two of them are confronting King and Queen, and both acknowledge that they have to win their fights, so Luffy can get one step closer to becoming the king of the pirates. It's just a level of locking in that we don't get to see too often from the both of them at the same time, and it's something that gets me hyped every time I see it. With that being said, No Sword style is a really cool technique, and it makes me a little upset that there's only one canon technique of it, so I hope it comes back again before the story ends. Ramen Kempo is a martial art style used by Wanze. Pretty much every martial art that we talk about in this video is only gonna have one user, but I think that that's fine, because it means that they're only going to be more unique and bizarre. Ramen Kempo consists of the user using self-made ramen noodles to fight. To do this, Wanze swallows large amounts of flour, mixes it with his saliva to make it into dough, and extrudes it from his nose, using his nose hairs to cut the dough into noodles for either battle or cooking. In order to do this, he also uses a special kind of flour called alloy flour in order to make the dough, which causes the noodles to be as hard as metal. Ramen Kempo is quite literally one of the reasons that I decided to make this video series, as it's so goofy that I knew that it would be fun to talk about, and the stuff that we see because of it is pretty insane. This is because the style also makes use of other tools and weapons, such as Wanze's roller skates and kitchen knives, showing that he doesn't follow the same kitchen tools are not for killing policy as Sanji. Sanji also finds Wanze's style of cooking and fighting to be a waste of food and a disrespect of cooking utensils, and thus makes him unqualified to be a cook. With that being said, Wanze showed us a lot more techniques than Zoro did with his no sword style, and I want to talk about 2 of them. The first of these techniques is called Ramen Beam, which is Wanze's signature technique. For this technique, he first swallows a large amount of flour, then covers one of his nostrils and fires it out of the other in the form of hard, sharpened noodles that pierce his target. This attack is very goofy, and honestly pretty powerful at the same time because of the impact, and it actually reminds me of a story from my real life. I don't really talk about my real life on on this channel, and I honestly don't know if you guys will ever see my face outside of the channel icon, but this story is pretty funny, and I remembered it because of the way that Wanze shoots out his ramen beam. You see, when I was a little kid, I wasn't the brightest child, so there was one day where I decided to shove a piece of a miniature chess set into my nose. This was such a problem that I had to be taken to urgent care, where they told me exactly how to get it out of my nose, and it was the exact same way that Wanze shoots ramen out of his nose. This has stuck with me so much that I even use the technique while blowing my nose into a tissue when I'm sick sometimes, so that's why I thought that it was worthy of talking about in this video. Forgive me for that last tangent, I may or may not have been a little drunk when I wrote it, but now you guys have some insight into my life if that's something that's important to you guys. Anyway, the ramen beam attack is really cool, and even though it's kinda like a parody of other kinds of beam attacks, it's still pretty powerful like we've already discussed. With that being said, there's one more technique of ramen kempo that's always stuck with me because of how wacky it is, and I would be doing you guys a true disservice if I didn't talk about it here. This technique is called ramen kempo ogi, men's formal suit, and it's literally just a Japanese noodle formal battle suit. In this attack, Wanze swallows an entire sack of flour and uses it to produce a large amount of noodles from his nose, which he shapes into a giant noodle armor for him to wear. Besides serving as a form of defensive protection and increasing the force of his blows, if any opponents try to strike him, they will be caught between the noodles, rendering them vulnerable to other counter-offensive attacks. While he does have techniques that he uses whilst in this mech suit, it's a mech suit that's made out of freaking ramen, so it's just really cool. In my last video, we talked about Queen, who's a big fat man that transforms into an orange dinosaur, and just like him, I don't expect to see a ramen mech suit when I first start reading a series, but there's no way that it could make it worse if it does appear. Wanze honestly ended up giving Sanji a harder fight than you would have expected when you first saw his character, and a big reason as to why that was the case was because of his martial art, ramen kempo. Jiao kundo is a martial art based on leg attacks, and it was first seen used by Bluegilly in the Battle Royale at the Koraida Coliseum. Now, if I had a nickel for every kicking-based martial art that we've talked about in this series, then I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Kundo is a close-range attack-based fighting style which involves leg motion so swift that foes cannot predict where a kick will land. The only known practitioner of this art, Bluegilly, has leg movements so rapid that they create afterimages that confuse opponents, and he can then attack with force comparable to that of a steel whip. Unfortunately, just like most of the martial arts that we'll be talking about in this video it seems, we haven't seen Bluegilly all that often, let alone seen him fight, so we haven't really seen too many techniques from his martial art. In fact, we've only seen one technique from his martial art, just like no sword style, and this technique is called Shooting Moon. In this attack, Bluegilly rushes towards his enemy and jumps rapidly to kick them in the neck in an attempt to break it. I'm gonna be completely honest and tell you guys that I didn't remember this attack at all before doing the research for this video, so I didn't expect it to be nearly this violent. It honestly feels like there aren't that many attacks in One Piece that have the goal of straight up killing people, so the fact that Bluegilly specifically tries to break the neck with this one actually caught me off guard. With that being said, whether this attack is effective or not is unknown since Bluegilly was defeated by Elizabello II's King Punch before he could manage to complete his move. So that's the only attack that we've seen from Jiao Kundo, and we didn't even get to see it land, even though Bluegilly has a cool character design, and it seems like his martial art could actually do some damage. Soken is a hand-based martial art style used by Sabo. The Soken style focuses on holding one's fingers in a claw fashion, crushing the adversaries with a powerful grip. Sabo compares it to a dragon's claws, rending arrogance and conceit, and he can even imbue his claws with armament hake, increasing their power, being able to crush Bastile's steel helmet and causing incredible damage to the Vice Admiral's head. The fact that Sabo can do this much damage with just his fingers is honestly kinda scary, and I've already talked about how ruthless he can be with these attacks in a previous video. Another important aspect of this style appears to be focusing on the core of the target, as by exerting force on the core of structures, it's possible to easily destroy them with a single blow. With that being said, this is one of the rare styles that has more than one technique for this video, as Sabo is a pretty important character, so we've actually gotten to see him fight more than once. He also also ate the Maramara no Mi during the Dressrosa arc, so he has techniques that utilize his flame powers, and some that don't. We're going to be talking about one of the basic ones first, because it just feels right, and the basic technique that I want to focus on is called Ryu no Kagezume. This is just called Dragon's Claw in a lot of English translations, and in this attack, Sabo attacks the enemy with a 3-fingered claw hand strike, and it can be used with hake to enhance its power. This is kinda Sabo's signature attack when it comes to this martial art, and the first time that we see it is when he's fighting Burgess during the final round of the Karaida Coliseum. It was also here that we got to see just how powerful it was, as it was strong enough to counter Burgess's elbow and break his armament hake infused armor. We also need to talk about Sabo's fight with Burgess at the end of the arc a little bit here too, as he actually just beat the shit out of him the whole time, and it was really satisfying to see. He was just wailing on this guy every time that we cut back to the fight, and Burgess honestly gets his ass beat a lot for a guy that's supposedly really strong. With that being said, we need to get back to Sabo, as his Maramara no Mi enhanced attack is called Moiru Ryu Soken Kaien Ryu. This literally just translates to Burning Dragon Claw, and after forming his talons, coating them with armament hake, and igniting them with his Maramara no Mi powers, Sabo slams them into his opponent and spins them around before blasting his target away with a burst of fire. It's kinda funny that we just talked about how badly Sabo beat Burgess's ass, because he also first used this attack against Burgess when he defeated him in their second battle during the Dressrosa arc. This attack was so powerful in fact that it even surprised the spectators that saw it land, just because of how far a powerful character like Burgess was sent flying because of it. It's always a treat to see Sabo whenever he appears in the story, and I just know that we'll see him fight again, so hopefully that means that we'll get to see some new Ryu Soken techniques as well. Gioken is a martial art used by Lao G. Gioken is a martial art that allows practitioners to utilize strong and speedy attacks such as fists and kicks in their old age. The user's physical body becomes so strong that they aren't affected by physical pain, and can also utilize Kyujong, the principle of cultivating and balancing one's own spiritual energy to store up the energy and strength from their youth for future usage. Lao G is the only person that's been showcased using this martial art so far, but since there are so many old people that still fight in One Piece, I wouldn't be surprised if we see another user sometime in the future. Also, although it's seemingly for comedic effect, Lao G can pull his soul back when he was apparently dead from old age, coming back to life. This may mean that Zoro isn't the only person that we've seen outlast the Grim Reaper in the One Piece story so far, which is a pretty insane feat in itself. Now, despite the fact that Lao G has only appeared in one arc so far, we've seen quite a few of his techniques, and have even seen an ultimate technique from the martial art, so there's actually a lot to talk about here. Lao G has actually shown us 3 of the basic techniques from the martial art, but they all stem from a specific stance, which is called Yotsu no Kame. This translates to back pain stance, and Lao G takes this stance by bending his knees, leaning forward, and stretching his arms in front of himself while having both of his hands make the shape of a letter G. I'm assuming that this is Lao G's variation of the stance since he loves the letter G so much, but we've never seen anybody else take it, so maybe this is just the standard version of the stance. We've seen 3 techniques from this stance already, but we're only going to be talking about one here, and the one that we'll be talking about is called Fushibushi no Itami. This translates to a mortal warrior's joint pain, and while in Yotsu no Kame, Lao G jumps forward and strikes all of his opponent's joints before landing behind his opponent. He first used this attack on Don Chenjiao, another old man, so it makes a lot of sense as to why it may have been more effective on him when compared to others. I just find it hilarious that one old man was attacking another old man's joints, so that has to be at least one of the reasons as to why I keep reading this story. And with that, we can talk about this martial art's ultimate technique, because of course it has one since this is an anime, with this ultimate technique being called Gioken Kyukiyoku no Higi Sento Hoken. This translates to ultimate art of the Geo Fist style, Battle Insurance Fist, and this technique allows Lao G to conserve his muscle powers from his youth, storing it for future use against any bodily degradation that may otherwise hinder his combat abilities, such as injuries, sicknesses, and old age. After activating stored muscle power, Lao G's body enlarges, gaining drastically increased musculature, and releases black electricity from his body. His strength and speed increase dramatically, effectively returning his strength to his prime, and he can now use new techniques in this form. We unfortunately only got to see one of the techniques that he can use in this form in the story so far, and it's called Ji no Kyokin. This translates to Seal of Ji, and after activating his stored muscle powers, Lao G dashes his enemy with high velocity velocity and punches them with his G-shaped fist. Lao G then leaves a G mark on his enemy, as this attack was first used to defeat Jiao. Now, I've only seen the anime version of this attack since I've never reread the Dressrosa arc in the manga, but the animation for it in the anime was really something special, so I've always remembered this attack. Once again, a super buff old guy isn't something that I necessarily expect to see when I start reading or watching a story, but it's never something that could make a story worse. Soul of Rock is a fighting style used by Vice Admiral Dahl of the Navy. Dahl has superhuman strength, as she could damage a Mark III pacifista with a flying kick and pummel a giant with her bare hands. Unfortunately, Dahl is another character that's just appeared recently, as she made her first appearance in chapter 1061, so she's another character whose martial art we've only seen one technique from so far. This technique is called Rock and Roll Blaster, and in this technique, Dahl imbues her fists with advanced armament hake before delivering a rapid barrage of punches at an opponent. This is really the only thing that we've seen from her so far, but at least we know that she's pretty damn powerful because she used it to take down a pretty powerful giant like Kashi. For those of you that don't remember, Kashi was one of the giants that was watching the gates of Eni's lobby because they got tricked by the world government, and when the Straw Hats broke through the gates, it was either the first or one of the first times that had happened since they became the Guardians. Dahl herself has definitely made an impact in the fandom since she first appeared, and I can definitely see her appearing more in the future because of the popularity she's gained. It's kind of like how Law became a more important character because of how much popularity he gained during the Sabo arc, except I don't see Dahl basically becoming one of the main side characters for multiple arcs. I do think that Dahl is going to make some more appearances, however, and just like every other martial art that we've talked about in this video so far, I hope that we get to see some more Soul of Rock techniques in the future. And with that, I thought I was done talking about the rest of the martial arts, but I have just one more martial art that I need to talk about, solely because of the character that uses it. This is because shiron hake is a fighting style that's utilized by Kaido, the world's strongest creature. By consuming alcohol, Kaido can enter a drunken state where it becomes even more dangerous than when he's sober. In this state, his movements become more unpredictable, he switches rapidly between his Zoan forms, and his haki becomes stronger. There are a ton of techniques that Kaido uses while in this state, but just like most martial arts that we've talked about in this video already, there's really only one that I want to talk about, and it's because it's the most memorable in my opinion. And with that, I've just lied to you guys, because as I read through the attacks that Kaido used in this state, I saw at least 3 that I needed to talk about, so those are the ones that I'll be talking about today. The first of those 3 is called Amai Jogo, which translates to Drunken Beggar. This is a begging drunk mode, and when using this mode against Luffy, Kaido began speaking flirtatiously and begged Luffy to quit punching him while in his man-beast form. This is just a hilarious image in my opinion, and the fact that Kaido was just eating all of these punches while he was begging is something that will always stick with me. The second technique that I want to talk about is called Satsuriku Jogo, which translates to bloodthirsty drunk. When using this mode against Luffy, Kaido takes full advantage of his human beast form's size and strength to deal heavier blows with more murderous intent. The fact that Kaido pulled out this form before Luffy even went into Gear 5 was actually pretty insane, and it kinda shows me that Luffy was pushing Kaido even before he went into his ultimate form. I also think that this technique really fits Kaido, mainly because of his mentality when it comes to the world, as he has to be a pretty ruthless man to even be able to go into this mode in the first place. And finally, the third and final technique that I want to talk about when it comes to shiron hake is called Nusubito Jogo, which translates to Drunken Thief. When using this mode against Luffy, Kaido uses his serpentine body in full beast form to copy Luffy's trajectory, changing punches. This really does show off the battle IQ that Kaido possesses, but that only makes sense because this guy is easily one of, if not the strongest character that we've seen in the story so far. I also believe that he showcases Future Sight for the first time in the fight, but I absolutely could be wrong here, as even though I make videos on the series, I'm not an encyclopedia of knowledge regarding the series. The fact that we had a whole fight during the Whole Cake Island arc where Future Sight was the main goal of it, just for the power to be sort of an afterthought for Kaido, once again shows us just how powerful Kaido truly is. And with that, even though there might be some more martial arts in the One Piece story for me to talk about, that's all I have to say about them for now. One Piece is a story that's so long that it would honestly get pretty boring if there weren't a ton of tiny, unique details, and the fact that Oda comes up with so many fantastical martial arts only makes the story better. They're all just a ton of fun, and the fantastical martial arts only enhance the fact that some characters use martial arts that are available for us to use in the real world as well. The most obvious example of this comes in the form of Chopper in my opinion, as he quite quite literally has a form called Kung Fu Point after the time skip. The fact that Chopper is actually a pretty prolific martial arts user isn't something that I expected, but the guy was willing to fully accept his Monster Point form if it meant that he can help Luffy, so it also makes sense that he was willing to learn an entire martial art. It's also pretty upsetting that he really hasn't done all that much since the time skip, since he actually had a few important fights before it, but I've already made my thoughts on Chopper's diminished role in the story on this channel before. I think it's pretty obvious based on the fact that I've turned this channel into a One Piece channel at this point, but I absolutely love the One Piece story, and somehow keep coming up with topics to talk about when it comes to it. With that being said, I do read and watch other anime manga series other than One Piece, so I plan on making another channel to make videos about those series in the future, so please let me know down in the comments section below if that's something that you guys would want to see. I obviously wouldn't upload on that channel as often as I do on this one, but there would still be at least one video a week over there, and they would be just like the ones that I make over here, just on different stories. So basically I'd be making videos about small details and character groups just like I do now, so please let me know if that's something that you guys would want to see. With that being said, I do think that it's time to end this video here, as I don't have anything else left to say about One Piece's martial arts. Please join me next time for whatever I post next. Please leave a like and maybe subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.